that's about an inch,
Yeah.
right? Kind of two fingers together between the top of the plant. And of course, as these plants are growing, you're adjusting either the plant further down from the light or the light further away because obviously they're getting higher and higher. When I say further, it's still about an inch,
Right.
but you need to move your lights up or your plants down to accommodate that growth. And it's one of the things I'm thinking about closely this year when it comes to, are my plants telling me that it's time to get them outside? Again, assuming I've started them on a proper schedule,
Right.
right? So if I have to make tomato plants are a good example of things where I'm just like, I'm doing all kinds of magic tricks because they're absolutely outgrown. They've outgrown. I'm like putting lights on the shelf above the shelf that the plants are on,
Yeah.
which again, in the past, I've looked back and said, yeah, they should have been outside. So there's that.
So before we go to the next one, I do have to ask you, when you said two fingers, you held them up like this. Do you mean like
Side by
that?
side. No, I meant like I don't know why I put 2 fingers up versus 1,
Okay.
but no, I meant flat, laying them flat, not, kind
Yeah.
of up.
I'm having a hard time with that because now that we're on YouTube, come check us out. And I keep forgetting that people can actually see our fingers, so and
Mhm,
stuff that we do. So I just want to make
mhm.
sure so we don't have any
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
And the other thing too is once you get a plant that's too leggy, you can't really reverse it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I it's almost a futile effort, so I'm like 99% there with you. You can for some plants, tomato plants for sure, you can bury some of the stem, but, once it gets to the point of leggy and it's kind of toppling over.
well, burying the stem is different. Okay. We're
Mhm.
talking about in the house. And what I'm referring to is when the top of the plant just kind of flops over. It's really hard. What'll happen is if you get the light closer and you do everything that we've suggested, the plant will actually start to grow up and curl up towards the light. But it's not the whole stem's not just going to stand back up and be like, cool, we're here. You've kind of so it's important to stay on top of it and be ahead of the game.
Mhm.
But just know that like once you and it's not the end of the world if you catch it in time, but if they get too leggy, and I think tomatoes are really the one standout. I mean, yeah, you can always plant them deeper, but the problem is going to be that you're going to have those plants laying over, and it's like a snowball effect. What ends up happening is they will actually shade out other plants in the process. And
Yeah,
so,
that's what I meant by
yeah.
burying them deeper. It potting up and burying the stem, even indoors, like when you're still under lights. So I think that, almost like take a moment. You said if you catch it soon enough. This actually introduces the question of how often are you checking on your seedlings, right?
Are you asking me, or
So,
is that rhetorical?
oh, when I got to the end of the sentence, it would have been it would have been rhetorical. No, in all seriousness, you think about like if we're talking all about diagnosing problems, no different than we talk about how often are you in your garden? You need to be in your garden to see things. I think your seedlings indoors, especially in that first probably 3 weeks or so, you're in a much more sensitive stage and looking at them based on where I am, I'm checking on them every day. Now, there may be a time or two where there's a couple of days where I'm away or something, and I really try to be strategic around the planning, what stage things are in and so on. But like seedlings don't get so leggy where it's, irreversible in a day,
No,
right?
no, no.
So if you're experiencing that, it's you probably weren't checking on them soon enough, and that's something that you could fix going forward, like if you want to start those over, which I've done for in some cases, like it's happened to all of us. I'll start, especially if it's a fast growing crop. Some of the squashes that we were talking about recently about to start and or not to start, that's a good example of how they actually could probably get super leggy like within a day and a half, like
Yeah, they're really fast
so
growers.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've not done a lot of restarting. I've kind of gotten to where I'm just like, but also I will say this, once you kind of pay attention and you get on top of it, it gets a lot easier. And then you start to figure out how much less time you actually have to spend in your seedling area. At first, when you put your seeds down, you don't really have to check on them a whole lot until they germinate. I mean, look, if you're doing this and you're not checking on them daily, though, I mean, what are you really doing? You know what I mean? Like, check on them. Just take a peek. I do want to.
Things started at different times, which means that they're at different stages of growth,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. And I will say this: my way of getting legginess that I've created, which is a really stupid problem to have.
Mm,
So I use plastic domes on top. I used to use Saran wrap, and I didn't like that because as soon as the seed came up, it was hitting the Saran wrap and it was bending it and putting pressure on it. So and I didn't like wasting it, so I bought reusable domes, and I've been using those for 3 years now. And I had just had some rutabagas come out, and they were in there. They were doing good. I left the domes on, and it was kind of cool in my house. We were going through a cold snap, and we don't run our heat real high. And what ended up happening was as they grew, I got a little confident and I was like, all right, I'll come back and check on them. Well, when I came and checked on them, I left the dome on because I wanted to retain some heat and moisture in there to help because they were kind of slow. The seeds were a little old too. And what ended up happening was those domes, because they had been used so much and they had gotten dirty from the water that evaporates and sits on the top, and that actually
mhm.
impeded the light. So
Oh, yeah,
that's kind
yeah.
of an issue. You know what I mean? Like that was like
Mhm,
everything else was set up and those got leggy. Now I'm not wasting them. They're outside. And what ended up happening is they flopped over. Some of them did crowd out other ones, stuff like that. So I just kind of said, whatever. And we'll plant them a little bit deeper to help. They're in
mhm.
right now, they're hardening off outside. But that was a stupid issue to have. I mean, now I've got to scrub my domes, which is stupid, but you got to do what you got to do, you know? And yeah, I had a thought and I totally lost it. I'll get it in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, sometimes, when I'm moving things from outside or inside to outside, what ends up happening is the elements of outside, get captured in the trays. And, every now and again, I may have something that I'm starting outside that I still want to cover, not because of humidity, like with one of those domes, but just based on animals and them not getting to them. So I'll cover them. But all you need is one good rain where, I totally get how those things get dirty, and it's a pain to clean them, but it's going to make for a better seed starting area, right?
Yeah.
I'm, there's a part of me that really loves the idea of the little greenhouse effect that the domes create, but it is a little bit of a burden too, because once you get to the point of, at least in my home, it's a lot of moisture. It's, when it comes to leaving them covered, but I think we're going to get into that in a little bit, like in this next topic,
Yeah.
because one of my poor habits leads probably increases the amount of moisture too.
Yeah. And about